A reading from the book of the prophet Daniel. As the visions during the night continued, I saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. When he reached the Anointed One and was presented before him, the one like a son of man received dominion, glory, and kingship. All peoples, nations, and languages serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not be taken away. His kingship shall not be destroyed. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day will gentle his condition. And gentlemen in England be near, will call themselves accursed, for they were not here today. And they shall hold their manholds weak and cheap, whilst any speaks that fought upon this St. Crispin's Day. These aren't my words, though you might think they were. They're the words of William Shakespeare in the character of King Henry V. For Shakespeare, King Henry V was the model king, the ideal. Why? Well, he was young and wise. He was handsome and learned. He was a prankster and a poet. Does he sound familiar? He was humble and pious. But most importantly, on the great battle of his kingship, the great day of conflict, he rose the occasion. He roused his men to follow him, not by lording over them and by controlling them, but by inspiring them, by being their brother, leading them into battle side by side against the enemy, against the forces that fought against them. And he was victorious. Now, for most of us in the chapel, the notion of a king or a monarchy is outdated. But I think that these qualities of the King Henry are something we still hope for in our leaders. After all, we want our president to be kind of a blue-collar worker who can enjoy a beer and watch a baseball game, but is still able to bring about the changes and the good which we hope to see in the world. Indeed, most political campaigns are built upon the notion of hope, of change, of a better tomorrow. But as is so often the case, that hope for tomorrow turns into our greatest fears, and the hero one day becomes the villain the next, until the next candidate is elected. And we have another hero until he fails and becomes the villain. The cycle continues on and on. But this cycle is not new. It's been around since the earliest days, even in the ancient Israelites. The Israelites wanted a ruler to come and to give them a land of security, of peace, a land where their enemies would no longer attack and defeat them. And they were so happy to name a king. But even the greatest king, David, was not without his faults. And one day he became a villain. Even the great Solomon, the wise king who built the temple, in his old age was seduced by other gods, became a villain. And the cycle continued and continued until the land of Israel was divided, until it was conquered and defeated again and again, until the Israelites were stripped away from their country and their temple destroyed. But in the midst of the hopelessness, in the midst of the suffering, there is a promise of hope. Here in the words of the prophet Daniel, one like a son of man will come down from heaven. This son of man will establish a kingdom that will last forever, where all the earthly rulers will hand over dominion and power to them. So where is this king? Where is this reign that will never end? In our faith, we call Jesus the Messiah, the Anointed One, the Christ. He is the one that fulfills the prophecies of the King who will come and the kingdom that will reign after him. But what sort of king was Jesus? Surely his crown was not one of gold, but of thorns. His royal court wasn't filled with princes and princesses and knights, but with fishermen, with widows, with lepers and foreigners. And in the eyes of the world, this king that was to come was a failure, killed as a common criminal. But he was victorious. He was victorious because he showed us that the kingdom of God is not a political entity here on earth. It is not a land, it is not a palace, it is not the armies, but it is the people of God. And through his life, he didn't seek power, but he accepted suffering. He didn't lord over others, but he served them. And in this, he showed us what it truly meant to be a king, what it truly meant to serve and to lead others into the path of peace. And this kingdom of God continues to live and reign on. It's bubbling at the surface and it spills out into our lives, into the world, but not as a nation, but of people. For each time a saint gives witness to the gospel, each time a martyr sheds her blood, she is bringing about the reign of God in the world. Even the faith of the smallest child is a great and powerful sign of the kingdom of God, which is now reigning forever. And this kingdom is not full of subjects and vassals. It is filled with kings. For in our baptisms, we are also anointed. We are anointed priest, prophet, and king. Christ shares his sovereignty. He shares his reign with us, not to lord over others, but to bring about the good news, the gospel message, the message of justice and peace to all the lands and all the nations. In our own lives, we participate in this kingship. We bring about the message to all the peoples of the earth. And we do so in the hopes that the few might become the great, and the band of brothers becomes the choir of saints.